Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. The new school year is here. Teachers are meeting fresh faces, setting up their classrooms, and laying out lesson plans. But the reality? Michigan doesn't have enough teachers. Prep hours are disappearing. Class sizes are growing. Burnout is rising. And more teachers are walking away, some to retire, others to leave the profession altogether. All of this comes at a tough moment for students. The latest state test scores released this week say kids are still struggling, especially in reading. Only 4 in 10 third graders hit proficiency on the M-Step this spring. Fourth graders didn't do much better. That means most students at those critical ages aren't reading at the level they should be. Now, there is some good news. Middle schoolers, especially 8th graders, posted gains in reading. But overall, proficiency in both reading and math is still below pre-pandemic levels. And teachers here make less on average than in many other states. That makes it even harder to keep people in the classroom. Still, there are signs of resilience. Michigan's teaching workforce is slowly climbing back from the losses of the COVID years. To help us understand where things stand and what it all means, I'm joined by Tara Kilbride. She's the Associate Director of the Education Policy Innovation Collaborative at Michigan State University and co-author of a 2025 report on Michigan's teacher shortage. Professor Kilbride, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So first things first, Professor, how bad is Michigan's teacher shortage?
It's difficult to answer that as a whole, looking at the state as one giant shortage, because teacher labor markets and shortages can be so local. So conditions really vary across the state and sometimes even just between two neighboring school districts. But as a common theme, there's evidence that shortages are widespread throughout Michigan. They just tend to look different in different parts of the state.
Okay, and we're going to get into that a little bit more later on, how things can look really different from one district to the next. But I'm wondering when this trend really started to pick up, losing teachers in Michigan. What's different now?
Really, around the decade following the Great Recession, so leading into the COVID pandemic, we were seeing stark losses of prospective new teachers. So decreases in the number of students who are enrolled in teacher preparation programs or completing those programs and becoming certified. And this was happening to some extent nationally and in a lot of individual states. But the losses in Michigan were particularly stark. I think our losses in teacher preparation enrollment were the second largest of all states, and our loss in teacher preparation completion was the starkest of any state. So that was really about a decade of stark losses before the pandemic started. Since the pandemic, we've been seeing a lot of heightened turnover. Michigan has been investing a lot at the state level in solutions, educator recruitment and retention. So we're seeing a lot of people coming in, but we're still seeing a lot of exits from the profession, just movement in and out, both at very high rates.
Could you paint a picture of what your research showed about the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic? I mean, what happened to Michigan's teacher workforce at that time?
So in that initial pandemic-affected year, or at least the first fully pandemic-affected year, the 2020-2021 school year, we actually saw a temporary drop in mobility. So people were maybe holding off on employment changes, whether that was to leave entirely, switch between districts, or start their first job if they had just finished a teacher preparation program and gotten certified the year before. So there was this short lull in that initial year, but since then, turnover has just been extremely elevated.
I want to get into the geography now, if we could, and the ways that you're seeing the teacher shortage distributed across districts. What does that look like?
It's very varied. So it depends to some extent on what measure we're looking at. So we look at a lot of direct and indirect indicators of shortages. We look at things like retention in schools, districts, and the profession altogether. We look at districts' reliance on teachers who aren't fully credentialed to fill positions. We look at reliance on new teachers and early career teachers. And we look kind of overall at the teacher workforce and then within a number of different subject areas. So the geographic patterns can be quite different depending on exactly what we're looking at. In general, some of the geographic patterns we see is that in urban areas, there tends to be a shortage of people to teach, period. Not enough teachers, reliance on people who aren't certified at all to fill teaching positions. Whereas in rural areas, there are also severe shortages, but they look quite different. There's often a shortage of teachers of a particular subject area, and which subject area that is can vary from place to place, but that seems to be a bigger problem in rural areas. And they need to rely on their staff to fill a wider range of roles or wear more hats because they have too few people to cover all of their needs.
Yeah, I'm wondering what some of the factors are that are at play when we think of these differences between shortages in urban and rural areas.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the supply of qualified teachers available in a given area. We've found geographic patterns in where teacher preparation program graduates go after they finish their program and become certified. And there are a lot of areas where there are very few teachers going, and there may be no local preparation programs in those areas, which might mean that people who live in those areas and go to school there themselves are less likely to pursue teaching because they would have to travel further to get that type of degree.
That makes sense. And something else that I'm wondering if we can connect the dots with. I mean, I was mentioning what the standardized state test scores look like for Michigan that were just released, and they don't look good. And it seems like there's a kind of feedback loop here. Less teachers could mean more students per class, and in turn lower test scores, and then therefore less funding, which then makes a district less attractive for educators looking for their next classroom. I mean, based on your research, have you seen evidence of this kind of feedback loop?
So something we've been seeing in our work, kind of monitoring learning recovery since the pandemic, is that there's more variation in students' academic levels and learning needs than there used to be. So there's going to be a wider range of levels in a given school and probably often in the same classroom, which kind of changes what a teacher's job is. You know, it can be particularly challenging to have to differentiate to a greater degree than a teacher normally would. The curriculum and the materials that they've used in the past might not be appropriate for where their students today are and the wide range of students that they might have today. So there's really a need for to be able to provide more individualized and differentiated support that it just isn't feasible without sufficient staffing. Yes, with teachers, but also paraprofessionals and other types of support staff. It's in some ways a different job in today's context.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering how teachers' jobs, specifically how they are changing. I mean, in districts where there is a teaching shortage, what does that look like on a classroom level? Who ends up teaching kids?
We often see certified teachers who are placed outside of their endorsement area as one solution when there's a person available but not someone with the right credential. We do often see long-term substitutes who don't have a teaching credential in classrooms. what's becoming more and more common lately is also somebody with an interim teaching certification. So this is somebody who's enrolled in an alternative route teacher preparation program where part of their training is working as a teacher of record under this interim credential, and that's becoming more and more common.
Yeah, talk about that. I mean, I'm thinking about the alternative routes to certification and how those are helping to close the turnover gap to some degrees. But I mean, that does raise the question, does making it easier to become a teacher mean Michigan's teacher workforce will have less training and perhaps be less effective overall?
That's a good question. And I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to the growth in alternatively certified teachers in Michigan, because so many of them are coming from two programs specifically that are new to Michigan and operate differently than alternative certification providers have in the past here. So a decade ago, Michigan only had a couple of alternative route preparation providers. They operated out of colleges and universities that also had traditional programs. They were generally serving the Detroit area. But the growth we've been seeing is following the introduction of these two fully virtual programs. So they're delivering preparation in a completely different way. They're not affiliated with colleges and universities. And this virtual aspect is really driving that growth because it's making alternative certification accessible in parts of the state where it wasn't before. So in the most recent data, we can see there's about as many alternatively certified teachers working in rural areas in Michigan as there are in urban areas, whereas they used to be almost exclusively working in urban areas, really just in the Detroit area.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, different programs, different places, so it's difficult to really know what the implications are without having enough time to see where these teachers end up.
Sure. I mean, I'm wondering, are there any other achievable policy solutions in effect that, let's say, may not fix the Michigan teacher shortage in its entirety, but that can really make a dent that you, as someone who researches this problem, want to see enacted?
Michigan has been investing so much in strengthening the teacher pipeline and teacher workforce. I think it's over $1 billion in state investments since 2020. And a lot of them are very early in their implementation, so it's difficult to know yet what's working. But some areas that we're pretty enthusiastic about are efforts to recruit from within local communities. Since we know these longstanding patterns and where teachers traditionally have been recruited from and where they do and don't go to ultimately to teach, there's clearly a need to be recruiting in different ways and from different places. So these grow your own programs and similarly designed programs recruit from within a school's existing support staff or from among community members in that area already. So finding people who are invested in those communities already, because those people are more likely to want to work and stay in those areas. Whereas teachers from a traditional pathway, even if their initial placement is somewhere far from home, far from their preparation program and where they went to college, they are far more likely to leave within their first 5 years and go somewhere closer to home. So to really have a sustainable, lasting impact in those underserved areas, I think that local recruitment is going to be an important strategy.
Professor Kilbride, before I let you go, I want you to put listeners into the shoes of teachers. How much harder is it to be an educator right now than it was, say, 10 or 20 years ago?
Hard to put a number on how much harder, but it's certainly there are mounting challenges, and a shortage affects every teacher in the building and the students and the school operations. Then the changing context with students' needs changing is a whole layer above that. So certainly during COVID, a lot of people gained, if they didn't already have, an appropriate appreciation for what teachers do and the importance of that work. But we are definitely cognizant of those challenges and how they're changing and growing.
Tara Kilbride is the Associate Director of the Education Policy Innovation Collaborative at Michigan State University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, Michigan's reading and math scores aren't very good, as we mentioned, especially compared to the national average. So can our state learn something from other states? Mississippi in particular? We'll ask that question next here on the Metro. Stay with us.